Good afternoon, everyone. I am responsible for the Inquiring Minds monthly series under the auspices of Toronto Mensa. I warmly welcome you to this Zoom edition of Toronto Mensa Inquiring Minds. My name is Kathleen Smith. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Ketan Kulkarni wears many hats. He is a professor in the Department of Pediatrics at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, and he's speaking to us from Nova Scotia today. Simultaneously, he is a physician specializing in pediatric oncology, which means he is dedicated to the care of children who have cancer. He is continually conducting medical research and publishes the results in professional journals. Ketan is an entrepreneur and coaches people on entrepreneurship, leadership, and finance. He has received numerous awards, national and international ones. Ketan is the author or co-author of award-winning books, the latest of which is The Savvy Physician, co-authored with Haley Gates. The material generalizes beyond the target audience of medical professionals to independent professionals working in many fields, even law and music. For today's talk, Dr. Ketan Kulkarni will focus on the topic of financial wellness. It is easy for people, especially recent graduates, but many others as well, to have accumulated debts. How do you avoid or mitigate that situation? Do you have a good grasp of financial planning? Would you like to look ahead to a retirement where you don't have to worry about your financial well-being? Our speaker will raise several of these and related issues for you to think about. Of course, he will not be giving advice on particular individual situations, but we who are listening will end up with a better understanding of the jargon and of the issues to help us with our individual decisions. Welcome, Ketan Kulkarni.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was a kind introduction. So really look forward to having this chat and talking about this important topic, which I think a lot of Canadians and other people globally find daunting, even if they're Mensans, I assume, because I think none of us get formal training unless you're in the field of finance. So this becomes quite an important topic, as I've learned in my own experience. So I think we'd plan to start with a little bit of a presentation. So shall I go ahead? Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. So please feel free to just interject or raise your hands or type out a question. I cannot see the question, so maybe Kathleen, I'll let you give me a prompt if somebody types in a question and I need to interrupt. So this is really focused on the general aspects of financial wellness and how we ended up doing a research project that eventually was published as a book. So I'm going to go dive into a little bit of the background for why financial wellness is so important for all of us, and particularly professionals all over the world, but particularly in Canada. So let's just start with a few examples. These are all real life examples with a few details changed. So they're quite relatable, and I'm sure you'd find a lot of parallels with your own situation in relation to these. So let's begin with a 36-year-old pharmaceutical accountant who is quite well-educated professional working as an independent professional in relation to the pharma. They're working about 50 hours per week, takes probably about 12 weekends every year because of the commitments and timelines. So some busy weekends. particularly for the last 6 years, they make high income. They're a powerful accountant. Let's say they make about 200K, which is well within the top few centiles of Canadian income. Now, this varies heavily based on the country. The Canadian top 1% income is still about shy of 300K. So it may not be as high as you think, or it may be a surprise to you to kind of find out these numbers. In contrast, if you see the top 10 percentile income, so the top 10% income in Canada is only about 110, 115K. It varies by province, but so still, the whole six-figure income is a big thing in Canada. 80, 90% people make less than six-figure income per year. They're married with 2 kids, and they have still about 100K remaining in student loans. Clearly, they're working hard and getting their promotions. There's very little time for family and hobbies and friends. This is not a stretch in any major Canadian city. They had to eventually buy something, and they bought $1 million home. This used to be like a mansion kind of home, but now in most Canadian major cities, $1 million is pretty much buying a fixer-upper. It's become outrageous. So that's all they could get is $1 million home, and with the car, it all costed a fortune. Now, it's been a number of years, and the whole hamster wheel, they're feeling stressed and burnt out since they're unsure where this is all going and whether, she can sustain all of this. And it's like that paradox of life has just begun, but it also feels like, oh my gosh, it's ending at the same time with all this financial responsibility and debt. And they're not sure what to do with the whole situation. So I'll let you kind of think about that and talk about another example, and then we'll kind of go back to all of these during our discussion period. So another example is a 58-year-old corporate lawyer, another very real life example. They've sort of slowly started cutting down their work hours, working about half of the year and 8 weekends for the last several years. In relation to corporate law, there's always timelines, just like our accountant. But this has happened after health issues that they faced sort of early to mid 50s. Still making very good income, multiple six-figure income per year. They're now twice divorced and plausibly in a new relationship. Kids are grown and live away. They have very good net worth of $2.5 million, which is substantial net worth in any country, certainly in the top centiles anywhere in the world for sure. They love their weekend parties, but they definitely miss the good old times, and something feels missing at this point. The biggest problem is they're not sure about the finance plan. They haven't really looked at what the remainder of life means and whether they can go into retirement or cut down work or take up something new. It's kind of unclear. And then let's take an early career example of a 25-year-old medical student, also a very, very common example. They're working 40, 50 hours per week. In addition to their schooling, extremely dedicated, straight A honor students. Used to have many, many hobbies, but now barely trying to stay afloat. Beginning of very long training years to become a subspecialist, and big worries of whether she can live in the city of her choice. No longer is it easy to get into tertiary care centers. There's very long training and long lineups to get into centers of excellence. Of course, the student loan is accruing very rapidly, and they're not educated in finances and investing as would be expected and is very common. They're wondering, where do we go and how does this all set up work? And there's a lot of stress and anxiety due to finances because the projected student debt is likely to exceed $250,000. So it's almost like minus 2 down payments for 2 houses by the time they're done and starting to work. Okay, so these are just a few commonly picked professions, accounting, law, and medicine. But these are so true from all walks of life, particularly for independently working professionals or sole proprietorships or, mama and papa shops, and even entrepreneurs that have a few employees. These are all very, very common real life example. And finance kind of is inseparable from our modern life because we definitely need money to survive. So Mensans, I don't have to tell this to anybody, they're among the most diverse and high achieving gifted 2% population of the world. So the cut point for Mensa is high enough. I believe it's 130 of IQ, which is the top few centiles of IQ measures. And all of us are very keen to explore, learn, and excel, and share and co-create to ultimately have what we feel is the best possible human experience. And experiencing high level of success and fulfillment is at the core of most of our life's goals. And the reason I bring this up is to kind of highlight that given we live in the 21st century, most of us are not going to ever live completely off grid. And finances becomes an intimate and intricate fabric of all of these goals to let us sort of deal with whatever life has to deal with, and then achieve our personal goals and success and fulfillment on our own terms. So, this is also even more relevant because, I've done a lot of work in the burnout territory, and there's rampant evidence of job dissatisfaction, burnout, and unhappiness. For example, in medicine alone, consistent Canadian data shows that about 50% or more of your doctors are burnt out. So, there's a 1 in 2 chance that you're seeing a doctor and they're not really interested in their job. That's not good, right? And there was nursing data during COVID time periods that showed about 90% or more burnout. So it was really appalling. And there's been an enormous exodus of nurses from our country, and a lot of the experienced older nurses have retired. And there's a huge perpetual shortage. So there's a lot of issues there. And there's a constant pressure to achieve more. Our inflation keeps going up. The government published data is always small numbers, but all of us know that what $100 bought 10 years ago is not even close as to what $100 buys now. This life is fast-paced, things are unclear, and there's changing standards for success. We always get into the mental trap of if-then hypothesis that, if I buy my house and then I'll be happy, if I go to Venice, I'll be happy, apply your own ifs and thens. And as we're seeing, traditional career paths on top of all of this are becoming rapidly obsolete. You could have a 20-year-old billionaire to, a 60-year-old starting a completely new career. Like it's totally becoming highly individualized in terms of how individual career paths go. And wealth parameters are changing rapidly. I've used this example so many times. The social ceiling has gone so high that there's actually, if you Google it, there's Facebook groups kind of talking about how to become a trillionaire. Like nobody needs $1 trillion, maybe except governments. But still, the wealth parameters and the ceiling of social achievement is so high that everybody looks at the Mr. Beast of YouTube to, Elon Musk of the entrepreneurship to generational wealth of the Sobeys or the Walmarts and the old European feudal families. And there's just so much changing parameter that it confuses the heck out of people. And then add to that the risk of hyperinflation, right? I mean, the value of money and what we can buy for X amount of money keeps dropping as inflation goes up. So all of this, highlights the problem that, financial well-being has become crucial and inseparable part of our very own existence and our very own living. So let's just try to define what we're talking about in terms of financial wellness. So financial wellness refers to the fundamental understanding and management of our own finances in the capacity to meet personal financial needs. So it's not about becoming a millionaire, or it's not about making a fortune. It's not about, trying to, find those pots of gold. It's about understanding what our, life and job and work or entrepreneurship brings to the table, and how do we, as best as possible, meet our own personal and families and your loved ones' needs. So it encompasses. So this was, we had to work really hard to kind of navigate these definitions and put them together. This is also part of that book. And so what we landed on was that it encompasses the ability to meet one's current financial needs, to craft a positive outlook towards one's financial future, and to earn the freedom to make one's choices in alignment with personal goals. And this is very important, right? I think, let's say you need a $50,000 lifestyle per year. That's your personal goal. Well, that's, you know what? You're going to supply that money. If you want a $500,000 lifestyle per year, you're still going to supply that money, unless you're lucky enough to inherit or win a jackpot or something like that. So the purpose is not to solely amass the money or just manage it. It's to make it in alignment with your own personal goals. So still, this needs a lot of work. In my experience, a lot of people are quite unclear what their true personal financial goals are. And it needs a lot of work and coaching to exactly identify what one wants to do. So this also underscores, I see some people from, of course, from different parts of Canada, but also from other parts of the world. So financial well-being has to incorporate the economic and tax systems that are existent and prevalent in the country. For example, US has a lot more tax break opportunities and lower tax rates on many things compared to Canada. And that makes a huge difference on what your net take home is, like the taxes on returns and the taxes on your entrepreneurial activities. Like everything is so vastly different that it makes a huge difference on a personal end. So navigating and understanding those is very, very important, right? And I think a person's number one best friend is the tax, because it's never going to leave you. The tax is always there. So understanding it and navigate it is just love it or hate it, but it's there. So the best skill we can develop is to understand what the personal and family implications for tax are, and navigate them and prepare for them effectively. So why is this important? Let's kind of connect some of those dots from the case scenarios and some of the slides we walk through now. There's a lot of data and growing body of literature that suggests that having more autonomy over one's finances and money through saving and investing and living within one's means. This is a big one. I'm not going to go into the debt issue, but the debt ceiling, the debt is rising so much in Canada that most people are in a lot more debt than they should be. And that's not for investing. That's for like personal consumption and so on and so forth, like a bigger car and a bigger house and stuff like that. That it is really, really important now to highlight the value of living below one's means, which used to be like kind of no-brainer, but that has changed quite a lot. And this can, very simple methods and sticking to your budget and timely saving and investing can really jumpstart people on their pathway to financial wellness. So this is definitely not rocket science, but it is rocket science to implement this on a consistent basis, because this takes years, if not decades, to have real dynamic impact. The other problem is that there's so many different perspectives and societal pressure, and particularly pressure from social media, right? I mean, there's only very few people who are not on social media in some form. And there's constant bombardment of, the Gucci's and the Pradas and the this and that, and everybody kind of somehow feels pressured into buying those. And maybe not so much the Mensans, but the average population I talk to, this is really difficult for people to separate themselves from the consumeristic, extreme hyper-consumeristic mindset and focus on financial wellness first. So this is huge, particularly for the early career people, who have not yet had the understanding of what their personal financial choices mean. And there's a very good growing body of data that once you achieve the clarity on financial well-being and what it means to you and apply those principles, there's a net ripple positive effect, giving you an improvement in anxiety and stress and relationships and energy levels and even mental and emotional health. And as a consequence, these improvements translate to better work performance, facilitating higher productivity. Happy person, happy work person, right? So I feel very strongly that the body of evidence is abundant to link excellent financial well-being with less burnout and higher productivity. And I'm sure many of you are aware that Canada is in a bit of a productivity crisis. We have among the lowest productivity in the world. Like, how many of you get frustrated when we call TELUS or call CRA and you're on the phone for 2 hours and you really can't navigate things quickly and nobody answers the phone and everything seems to take hours and hours? So I think it's really important to sort of consider all these things in perspective and try to address that issue. So we, in our research and studies, we identified that there is a gap, and there's a big gap. We find that professionals are really good in what they are trained to do. For example, a Red Seal carpenter is really good at the Red Seal work, the woodwork. Physicians are good at what they do. Lawyers are good at what they do, but we're often not well versed in financial literacy. It just seems that, it's something that's not constantly talked about. It's a taboo. We don't do this and that. And, people don't want to talk about their salaries. And all of this leads to financial decisions being very emotional and then later justified, right? Oh, I like that $200 pant, let's buy it. And then later, oh, I really needed it. And that's your 16th pant in the closet, right? So it happens way more often than you think. I mean, I know so many people who bought a house because they thought that's their dream house and now they're house poor. I mean, we had a colleague here who would only heat half of the house because it was too big, and they were tired of the heating bill, so they were just not heating half of the house. I mean, that's not a great way to live, right? So it needs to be sort of really carefully thought about. And again, going back to data, key financial decisions can truly impact one's life, both short-term and long-term, because your decisions will impact how much money you need to supply and how where your tax bracket sits and how it's going to really shape up in your life. So, it is essential to have authentic, evidence-based, and unbiased advice from early stages of training, whatever field you may be part of. And this is a huge problem. Canada, once again, it's fraught with very bad financial advice. It's very, very difficult to find like fee-only, unbiased finance advisors. The whatever products banks and common financial institutions give are very, very inferior products. They're not great. They charge high fees, and getting really good advice is not as easy as you may think. A lot of people, at least the way we saw it, unless people take things in their own hand and invest the time and effort, you're likely to get pretty bad financial advice, and particularly bad investment advice, and that is really, really essential to understand. And, the ever increasing complexity of the finance world and the mixed messaging you get, somebody's doing crypto and somebody's doing NFTs and real estate, and, all of those terminologies definitely boggle people's mind, and people just kind of shut down and they say, well, I don't want to deal with this. I'm busy enough dealing with my home and family. I don't want to deal with this. And that's really the real situation that happens, and thus, when we did a lot of research on this resource issue, we identified a crying need of a simple, evidence-based, easy to read, and immediately applicable resource. And that's the really purpose of doing the subsequent slides, and I'll explain what we did as a consequence. Clearly it was important that we cannot have too much jargon. Something needs to be readable and immediately applicable in busy lives. Also, we need a vetted resource, right? I mean, a resource cannot be great just because I say it's great or somebody's pumping it to the market. You need just following scientific evidence. You need, vetting process, and you need a process to have more than one person look at it and say, well, this kind of makes sense, and I can use it. So that was an important aspect of quality control that we thought was important. And, the other aspects are accessibility, which I'll talk about. A lot of times we tend to believe that good advice has to be very, very expensive, and a lot of finance and money coaches will charge you hundreds and hundreds of dollars per hour, right? So it's definitely not accessible resource, even if they may be good. So this is an important aspect of the need as well. So in the beginning, we designed a research study to identify how we could bridge this gap and develop some form of an educational resource, And when we started, this was led by Haley, who was one of my research students and now is a medical student with a background in physiotherapy. And it was fueled quite a lot by her own personal experience with a lot of debt. She herself has said in the book, she has more than 100K of debt and accruing another probably 100, 200K of debt through her med school. So a huge amount of debt when she's going to be finished. And she felt a crying need of pursuing literacy in finances, which fueled her passion to sort of work with us and our team to develop this educational resource. So it was really a passion-based project, which is so important, right? I mean, that's what makes the biggest difference. So the primary objective was to offer some sort of a practical structure to make informed decisions, setting achievable financial goals, managing your debt, and understanding the impact of these choices on overall well-being, both in and out of workplace. So it ties in a lot of the previous slides we talked about. And then the secondary objective was to explore how lifestyle decisions can influence financial stability, mental health, and overall wellness. So the way we went about this was that first we reviewed a lot of medical literature, or actually overall literature on both physicians and professionals in relation to finance. And there's not a lot of very highly published data. It quickly leads you to professional websites or investment companies or well-known banks and such other websites that kind of pump the literature, and everybody promises the best return since moon and back, right? So it clearly there's not that much great literature published in the area. So then we quickly morphed to identifying a cohort of at that time, and because of our own professions, physician wellness advocates and finance experts. So we identified more than a dozen finance advocates and experts. So somebody who was a trained medical doctor and doing something else, such as either being a wellness dean, or they were an entrepreneur, or they were running a podcast, they were doing blogs. And there's a lot of different people who do these kind of things, and particularly not for profit. So we identified people who were doing something for the community and did not have necessarily a service to sell. So, there was some careful selection criteria. We identified a lot of people from different professions to intertwine their own personal journeys. And then we developed a standardized interview. I'm not going into crazy detail of how we did this, but we developed a standardized interview, and everybody was asked the same question in the same amount of time. And all of that data was recorded and then subsequently analyzed and sliced and diced to make part of the work. We also accessed previously published and developed work and manuscripts by our group. Like over the years, I've been asked to write a number of finance articles and develop some courses and slideshows and this and that for different topics. And those definitely came handy. We never thought we would go back to those, but those already had different bits and pieces done. So, that was helpful for us to take in perspective when we started doing the work. So then we started thinking, how do we present all of this, right? I mean, it started with a little, handbook to hand out to students or professionals. And then we made it a little bit bigger with literature. And then we made it a little bit bigger with the interviews. And then we made it a little bit bigger with, previously published work. So it became like a huge project from where we started, because we just didn't know a better way to take just one pie of one piece of the whole pie and just present that. It wouldn't be complete. So we decided that, we will present the results of the study and the whole idea from the lens of an early career trainee, so that it's very, very clear perspective on debt and financial education. So the qualitative analysis of information gathered was really, really helpful because then we were able to base it in different categories or group it in different categories and then develop a lot of interactive and reflective questions on each of the major topics. So that's probably one of the biggest things that resulted from a qualitative analysis, because initially we were not thinking that we would develop reflective questions, and that was quite helpful. And then this whole project took more than 2 years, and the manuscript became like more than 100 pages long. So then we said, well, this is going to be really buried, and you put it in a journal, really difficult to they slice and dice it and cut it and make it like prose. So ultimately, a decision was made to make this to publish this as an open source book with availability in both online and print form at very nominal costs. This is not a for-profit venture, so we were able to work with Amazon, and they do, love it or hate it, they do a phenomenal job at cutting the costs to really make it possible. So the ebook we were able to cut it down to like $1. So that made it was possible with collaboration with Amazon, and I don't even believe how they do it, but they're able to print a book on demand and deliver it to Prime members, with all the color pages and all of that for under $10. I find that unbelievable. It probably works because of their very strong pipelines and like a bulk distribution format. So, that was very important to us because we wanted to make sure things are widely available and accessible without cost barriers. This is how the book looks like, and it will, I don't know if you can see it, but it talks about all of these different topics in bubbles, and clearly it's not restricted to physicians, but because it was developed by our community, we named it as such. So, this is very important. We get asked constantly, well, so then what are the topics, right? So I think the first topic is why financial wellness is important, which we delved into, but then we cannot try to go into what does life mean as a professional or a physician in Canada, and, a rich tapestry of cultural variation and geographic variation, and of course, cost and tax variation according to each of the provinces is really, really important to understand. For example, the provincial tax in Alberta is only 10%, regardless of your income. So if you make $10,000, let's say $50,000, you pay $5,000 in tax. But if you make $1 million, you still pay $50,000 or $100,000 in tax. It's flat 10%, which makes a big difference, right? I mean, every other province has a tiered tax structure, and taxes quickly go up to 30% provincial and almost 25+% federal, right? So the tax implication on personal income is huge. we also wanted to highlight that, money is a means goal, right? I mean, this is probably a topic in itself and worth spending a whole hour on, but most of us get confused that money is the end goal, that, I want to have $1 million. I want to have $5 million, whatever the number is, whatever comes to your mind. But the truth is that money is a tool of transaction, right? It's the means to our end goals, which would mean, taking care of our loved ones and spending the time in the manner we want to spend and making the contributions you want to make, or playing the music, or whatever it is that is important to you, maybe acting, or, community service, volunteering. Whatever is your desired chosen lifestyle, the money is the tool to get to that point. And this is a very important concept, because that's what's really the underpinning of fulfillment and satisfaction is. Uh, and then, we go into income and expenses and how to balance the balance sheets and really developing a budget. And, budget is probably the easiest thing to develop, but the hardest thing to stick out. I think most of us are very good at developing a budget, but then it becomes very difficult. Something comes up every month and the budget goes out through the window, so that's very important. We focused on that. And then the impact of major financial decisions, such as, purchasing a house. And, as it stands today in modern law, marriage and, or choosing a partner is probably among the most important financial decisions you will make, because of the rules and risk of separation and consequent financial implications. So that it goes into all of those situations. And of course, living within your means and not buying highly depreciating commodities, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the holy grail of finance is investments. And I think this is where most people have a lot of difficulty, because there's so much jargon, and, what do all the asset classes mean, and what are the major types of investment pools available, and the mutual funds, and, the management expense ratios, and how to identify a good advisor. So we spent a whole bunch of pages and 2 chapters and sliced and diced out all the information, breaking it down to very, very simple language, so that, anybody teenager and up can really understand and apply that. Okay, these are the things that matter. And then we intertwined all those questions along the way. And then, of course, handling the debt level and managing the debt is among the most important decisions one can make. And then, one of the questions we commonly get is, what kind of insurance do I need? And most people are underinsured, right? It's very difficult to be overinsured. So we had to go through a whole bunch of different kinds of insurance, like, disability insurance and critical illness insurance and professional insurance and the whole life policies. And there's so much there to consider on insurance level that, we had to make a separate chapter on that. And then, of course, going back to our examples, it all comes down to making a personalized blueprint, which we give a fancy term to, and it's called the financial plan. So we developed a tool to kind of put all your information together, and the book will guide you to make your own financial plan. And then, of course, as they used to say, the retirement golden years. But there's something to challenge in that. And the modern context of retirement is quite different. A lot of people they want to be productive, lifespans are increasing, they're taking up different careers. So we go into all of that and throw new light on what retirement means in modern Canada and in modern developed world. And then, of course, leaving your legacy to your loved ones is very, very important. And whatever is important to you, I think that planning also needs to start early, given the complexities of tax structure and probate and all of that stuff. So that's how we sort of covered in terms of the topics. And this was heavily guided by the qualitative interviews we got, and the pearls that different people gave us in terms of what their problems were and what they're thinking of and how they deal with issues. So as we said that, the purpose was to develop a practical guide with immediately applicable concepts and toolkits and, links and, different things like that, with recommended books. And the main part, as I said, was the interactive questions, which then brings us to periodic review. It's not something to be done once, it's something to be done every 3 months or every 6 months or at least every year, to see if your net worth is increasing. We included tools to calculate your net worth, and how do you do that, and put it in an Excel sheet, and then keep comparing it year over year. And as long as you're going up, you're doing it the right way. So there's a lot of different aspects of practical take homes, and that's the book. I just took this screenshot today, so it was nice to see a few more reviews. And I did not know that Amazon actually gives you an AI summary of the book now. And it was kind of nice to see this, that they just, this is from today, and they called the book as an invaluable source for professionals and amplifies financial coaching. I thought the use of words was pretty nice, and the readers found that it was a great read that is simple and easily understood. So so far it seems like we're meeting our target. The book was published just in August, so very recent, and still retains some of his bestseller statuses. So that's very heartening to see that we are able to achieve um, some of our objectives. And I think that is the last slide, but I took out the slide of next steps. But as our next step, we are actually formally analyzing some of the qualitative data, and I'm going to have a new student work on that. And we also think that it would be important to put that out in the public domain of what the personalized journeys of all of those people look like. So stay tuned for that. I think that would be a real life impact. And then we are working towards developing interventional surveys, as you know, how does the book actually change people's knowledge? We haven't tested that yet. So that would be, some of the future steps in that direction. And I think that's the last slide. So I'll stop sharing there, and happy to go back to the questions, to the scenarios if people want to, or maybe I'll let Kathleen start the interactive part of it, and we can go from there.
Well, that's a great talk. Thank you very much, Ketan.
No problem.
Very informative. I'll just start by acknowledging where people said they were signing in from, because I like that. And there goes a clap up into the air. That's nice. Okay, Epsom, UK, United Kingdom. Vancouver, Oakville, another one from Vancouver, Victoria, BC, and Aurora, Illinois, and Tampa, Florida. And I'm sure there'll be more coming in. So I noticed that at least I wanted to ask you a few questions myself, but if I see a question coming in, then that will get priority over the questions that I'm asking you. Okay, so first of all, you talked about burnout at the beginning, and we hear the word burnout, but what does it actually mean? What are the symptoms of burnout?
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question, right? I mean, so, I've personally been through burnout without realizing what it was in the beginning. And, that was a life-changing journey for me personally. And, I think we've talked about this on other sessions, but, burnout is a situation, there's many definitions available now and probably better recognition, but common symptoms are, people start feeling fatigued, they feel not rested enough, you suddenly notice that somebody was doing okay as a change in personality. They call it depersonalization. They suddenly start becoming very cynical or angry or unhappy, or they're, making curt remarks, and you know and then the last stage is sort of emotional exhaustion and total lack of interest and apathy, that they're just checking out, sort of thing. And then everything in between, right? I mean, so now they have subclassified burnout into like latent burnout and early stage and fully burnt out, and we don't have to go into the semantics, but it's recognizing uh you know especially for employers and teams, to really take care of each other and recognize if somebody is depersonalizing, if somebody is not engaged anymore, if somebody's showing up late and they just don't care, like, and they feel fatigued and they're constantly taking time off. And I think it's a huge phenomenon that is real. Everybody who says, oh, they're just being babies and not being tough, and maybe there's some reality to that. And but you know the more scales that we look at and the more data we look at, the more real it looks. And maybe part of it is that expectations have changed, and we could take this a lot further, but expectations probably have changed from each generation to the next generation. That could be a great topic in itself, that the baby boomers thought differently than the millennials, thought differently than the Gen Zs, and now I think they call it the alpha generation. The priorities and expectations of each generation are different. And as a consequence, maybe we are over-reporting burnout, but it's here to stay. People are unlikely to just, suck it up and do it. They're probably not going to do it here onwards. Everything, the cat is out of the litter. So I think we're going to have to develop strategies for working with people and harnessing their strengths. And I truly believe financial wellness is one of those strategies, that you're going to have to harness and make sure that people are well taken care of, so that we go in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. JD, Jahangir Darawala, says, you mentioned that Canadians have fairly high levels of personal versus investment debt levels. Does your book provide any advice about debt reduction strategies without harming credit ratings? Thank you.
Yes, and that's a great question. I think you nailed the bullseye, and I think it is a lot easier to do that before you get to the point of high debt. But like in Haley's situation, Haley had to mount a lot of debt because she, in her personal situation, it was not possible for her parents to offset her debt, or there was no inheritance, or she just had no other way. So I think it comes to really making choices in terms of finances and solidly living below the means. And so we go through a lot of different scenarios of payment rates and rapid repayments, and checking the interest rates on the debts and paying the higher interest loans faster, and really trying to manage your lifestyle in such a way that you can repay those high interest debts as fast as you can. And it is not easy. I totally see the point that very easy said, very hard done, but there's many strategies. Particularly, I think the credit score rating will be significantly harmed if you have credit card debt. And that's probably the worst kind of debt, because it's 20 to 30% interest rate, and credit cards quickly spiral out of control. So, we do include a lot of strategies, such as absolutely making sure your credit card is paid in full at the end of each month, and not accruing, excessive debt on credit card, and not spending future income. Do not anticipate your income and then spend that before you've made it, because this happens quite commonly. A lot of professionals, say dental school students or whatever, the banks are very good to give them, say, a 200K line of credit. And then, suddenly, we've seen some people drive out a Porsche. Like, this is not even an exaggeration. We see students going out living in Belize for a month, and, you had a fancy vacation, skiing trips. And before you know, you've used up all that debt for lifestyle choices, anticipating the future income and that you will pay that back. But you have to remember that you haven't earned the income. You have to pay tax on that income, and then from after tax dollar, you have to pay all that debt, and then it accrues all that interest over long periods of time. So suddenly, people have spent the income they haven't made, and you're like years and years and years behind. This is particularly relevant because the years of training are becoming longer. More and more people are training longer and longer years. So it's going to take people even longer to pay back all the debt. So the most recent example we came across was pharmacy schools. I think now pharmacy schools have changed their programs to a PharmD. I think everything is a PharmD now. And I think the fees per year are now anywhere between 20 and 50,000 for tuition. So, the pharmacist income increased quite rapidly in the last few years, but that's good for the previous pharmacists. Now the new ones going in are going to come out with a 200K plus debt at the end of their degree. So, it's almost like, well, they haven't earned that income. You've accrued a 200K debt. So even if you're making higher income, now you're going to have to wait that many years before you're financially ahead. So it's a bit of a snowball effect. And I think, the strategies for debt management have to be started at high school level. People really have to understand what they can afford to spend, and how to maintain a tight budget. And I really feel it's an acquired skill, and very difficult to do in the era of social media, when there's always the next shiny object. It's very, very easy to get carried away into that. Great question.
Okay, thank you. Peter asks a question. I'm sure you can answer it in a general way, rather than, trying to get advice to an individual. But he says I'm turning 71, and I will not have any more RRSP advantage.
Yeah.
My current savings are a little bit less than adequate. As a late bloomer, my income has reached a very high level. Is there an avenue available to me to save more rather than paying high income taxes?
Right, and that's a great question, and we've come across these situations. I mean, certainly we have to do a full analysis of, so we'd have to look at, your home ownership and your monthly expenses and income level and how much you save. One of the strategies, if you haven't explored, would be looking at insurance policies. Now that depends on whether or not you have family and other dependents, and if you want to pass on some of that generational wealth. Like the premiums might be quite expensive, but it might be possible to have some added death benefit. All of us are 100% dying at some point, so that's a guarantee. So definitely please explore the insurance avenues. And even when you're investing, now it depends on the type of work you do and the type of income you make. We would have to find out if you're making personal income, or if you're incorporated, or if you're a sole proprietor. You might want to start looking at whether you can incorporate as a small business. In Canada, there's more than 1 million CCPCs, they call it, Canadian Controlled Private Corporations. And for the income you don't need, so we go through the whole incorporation exercise in income and expenses. A lot of people will incorporate if they can, and then let's say you make 200K and you only need 100K a year, then you can leave that 100K in the corporation. And the corporation is a separate entity than you, and you only pay tax on the 100K that you pull out. So the remaining 100K can be invested on a tax deferred basis. The CCPCs qualifying in Canada have a much lower tax up to first 500,000, unless you use that income for personal expenses. So if you can set all that up, for sure, I would look at that, because you can gain a lot of advantage. But if you're fully personally, if you have to take all the income in personal name, then it's quite a bit difficult. Like you said, you cannot avail the RRSPs. Your only ways to drop the income tax might be to look at charitable donations, look at insurance, look at some of the investments that have very low tax rates, such as Canadian dividend stocks and so on and so forth. So that's a great question, but I think, and this is, I think, highly generalizable, like Kathleen said, to all of us. All of us need to consider that, how am I making income? What is my expense? How do I optimize? It's not about tax evasion. How do you optimize your taxes? Because, everything has implications. You cannot just kind of go and incorporate unless you can maintain that for the long term. And using, some of those benefits, if you qualify according to your age, for RRSPs and TFSAs, and retirement plans and private pension plans, I think, a lot of those strategies have to be used in unison. It is no one strategy, but yeah, congratulations. I think your golden years are still further ahead. So fantastic. And feel free to reach out if you wanted to have a more personal chat. Happy to do that, and provide some pointers in the right direction as well.
Thank you. Paul in the United Kingdom says, I enjoyed your talk. Thank you. You touched on the issue that I would call the hedonic treadmill. If I just have a bit more money or stuff, I'll be happy,
Yeah.
which is generally a myth. It made me wonder how much of your book, which I just bought, addresses strategies to stop folks sleepwalking into this thinking before they get into debt, burnout, or life being over, as you mentioned. On their
Yeah.
deathbeds, people rarely regret their lost promotions, but they regret stuff around their human relationships.
Oh my gosh, you nailed it, and that is absolutely a brilliant question, and you're so right. I think, so I'm going to answer it in backward way. So this goes back to actually our first book, which is called The Legendary Quest, and it's still on Amazon. And we won a number of awards for that book, and we tried to answer those questions in a lot of detail in that book. And I 100% agree. We are all at fault for it, and hedonic treadmill is such a big mental trap. And we know that we all get used to whatever new shiny object we get to, and then we need another new shiny object. And this is so well known with the celebrities and royalties that there's no purpose, so therefore you need the Cartier, and then you get this thing, and then there's the Ferrari, and then there's the Porsche, and there's jumbo jet and something else, and everything kind of fades. And I think you already gave the answer. I think the true essence of happiness is in cultivating meaningful relationships, which is abundantly clear from the Harvard study on happiness, and the longitudinal Harvard study that followed people from 1930. And there's a lot of data that true purpose and meaning and human relationships are the biggest predictor of happiness. And that's why I think in this book, we really focused on talking about money as a means goal. You really have to spend the time and take the time with your loved ones and coach with somebody and figure out what your ideal, and you're allowed to change as you go, right? But you have to figure out what your ideal goal and lifestyle is, and then kind of intertwine the finances to fit that. And this is why often, you hear this commonly, and, oh, the rich people are unhappy. I think it's a common experience because of this observation that a lot of people kind of kept chasing and they invested all their time 24/7 into making money. And in the meantime, were not able to bloom their relationships and make the human connection and really get into authentic success, I think we present that data in a lot more detail in the first book, which is called The Legendary Quest. And this one is a little more limited to kind of focusing on finance, but we do touch on the hedonic treadmill and, sort of few of those mental traps, the if-then hypothesis, and how we always are ready for that. Even I do that now, but it's about being aware that, okay, it's not about the next shiny object. It's truly finding out what's in alignment with our ultimate goals, and your ultimate goal could be as simple as volunteering twice a week in the local fire station. That's fine, but I think you got to identify what's meaningful to you. So
Thank
great
you.
question.
Andrew in Ohio wants to know if there's an audiobook available.
Not yet. We didn't do it. We're looking for, unfortunately, one of our big criteria in Canada was to make the book not expensive. I say unfortunately because it seems that it's becoming very, very difficult now to record those audiobooks. So we're looking for some volunteers and somebody with good diction to help us at a low cost to make it. Otherwise it ends up costing a few $1,000s, and we're looking for some money, either some money to do that or identify other ways of having it recorded. So hopefully shortly we'll have it. One of the solutions we received was that we're hoping to house this book as a PDF on a website in future. And some people, we're beta testing this right now, but some people are able to use like a PDF reader, which is apparently free. And then the PDF reader reads the book to you. So we're kind of working through some of the options on that. So if you have any great thoughts on how to do it, so without increasing the cost, feel free to reach out to us and let us know.
Okay. Elka in Oakville says, it seems to me that the rate that net worth increases is significant, especially for people with large mortgages or loans.
So I say that again, that what was the last?
It's a comment, but I think she wants you to respond. It seems to me that the rate that net worth increases is significant, especially for people with large mortgages or loans.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I mean, we've had an unprecedented increase in net worth. So, I watch this data very carefully because it's very important when we're doing talks and teaching students. So the last data was that there's at least 1 million millionaires in Canada, which is a lot, right? That includes their primary homes, but roughly speaking, we have a population of 40 million people. And at least on the record, there's expected to be 1 million people with a net worth of more than 1 million. And the other way to look at it is net worth by age. This is individual net worth by age. And it is quite high, I mean, the top 1 percentile Canadian net worth rapidly increases once people are over 40. So I think for people in the 40s, it's somewhere between 3 and 4 million. People in the 50s, probably 5 million. 60s, 70s, the top 1% net worth individual level is over 7 million. I think the top 1% overall net worth in Canada is quite high. It's more like $10 million. So there is a lot of wealth, and it's obviously not evenly distributed. There's pretty high concentration of wealth in the top centiles. So I totally agree. And that's one of the problems of hyper-capitalism, right? So great comment there from mathematical perspective, and it's almost like, somebody who's making 5,000 works hard and gets all those promotions and gets to his 10,000 level, but the value of 10,000 is already diminished, right? So it becomes like a perpetual chase. And, that is why probably so many people are falling to the capitalistic trap that, look at the condo market in Toronto, right? I mean, people were essentially buying on spec that, next year it'll be worth 600, then it'll be worth 700, it'll be worth 800. And then whatever goes up has to come down by the law of nature. And what's happening now, like, it's a bit of a disaster and bottom falling out. But that's the whole issue, that, the whole speculative nature. And I think the other part of the math is that because of the power of compounding, it's just that much easier for somebody. I think the old saying is that the first million is hard and then the rest is history. It's because of the power of compounding, which we go into a lot of detail in the book, because even by mathematical modeling, somebody who has $1 million in the bank and consistently putting in money into that, the whole power of that compounding is they're going to get to 2 million very fast, like within 7 years, I think, even with average returns. And then those with 2 million are going to double to 4 million similarly, right? Because of the power of compounding. So it's not linear. The first 100,000 is really, really hard because people have to get educated or whatever. And then the 100,000 to million is a big journey. And then it just churns, right? And that's why, I mean, it's funny, whenever I go to Europe, you see this. I mean, some of the old families from the medieval times are richer than the banks, right? The big governments are borrowing money from them because it's all compound interest. Their principal is just, whatever it was. And now it's just all huge amount of compounding over, hundreds of years.
And I noticed that in your book, you've mentioned a few different ways to calculate things. You've given formulas.
Yeah,
And it's
correct.
all very easy to follow. And so there are formulas in there for calculating simple things like net worth and more things like budgeting and so on.
Yeah. I mean, so what we wanted to do was give people templates so then they can copy paste that in the Excels and fire away, right? Put your dates and times and then just do it every few months or whatever's your frequency, but ideally every quarter or so. And then you keep track of your budget and you keep track of your net worth and so on and so forth.
In your list of resources, you mentioned an interesting website that I went to. It's called projectbiglife.ca.
Yes, that is correct.
And they have several things there you can do. And I did one of them, which was, what is your life expectancy?
Yeah, that's exactly why we included that. I got exposed to that. It's a really cool project out of Ottawa. And, the truth is that if most of us, as long as we follow the good, healthy guidelines and do the right things, most of us will live into their 90s. So the old idea of, retirement and, years in retirement is rapidly changing, right? So it's going to happen that people in 70s are going to take up a new career, like our new late bloomer there, congratulations, So I think it's going to happen more and more. People in the 80s are going to take up a new career and maybe suddenly become successful. And, we've had some people here, after retirement, they're doing their PhDs and starting a new career. So it's all constantly changing, right? I think you've changed your career after your first. So I think there's a name for it now, and they call it profile career. So people are going to have a mishmash of different careers. And we talk about that in the context of retirement, right? And
you talked about a portfolio. Portfolio career.
Portfolio careers, profile careers. It's going to happen. What I'm doing is also a portfolio career, right? I mean, people are kind of, not everything has to bring the same amount of dollar. It doesn't even have to bring $1, but if you're doing it as part of your career, like there's, so that the other common terminology for it is side gigs, and I think side gigs are very undervalued. That's probably so meaningful for a lot of people. I've seen so many people with a side gig bringing them maybe $10,000 a year, but they love it, right? And that gives them purpose and meaning. And, you never know, one of these days it might explode and become quite big, right? So it gives you, I think, goes back to the question of purpose and meaning. Really kind of do what ticks you, right?
So JD has mentioned he knows how you can create a low-cost audio book, and I'll pass that information on to you after.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I'm keeping an eye on the time. It is now, in your time zone, it is 4 p.m. And I just wanted to check with you. Are you ready to stop at this point, or just want to take any more discussion? Or what do you
Well,
want?
let's check if anybody has 1 or 2 questions, and otherwise we'll respect the time of the webinar and let people go. It's
Well,
Sunday
okay,
afternoon. Thank you for coming despite Sunday afternoon. Always a pleasure to see that many people online Sunday afternoon.
claps are coming up. And Paul in the UK has raised his hand. Paul, let me see if I go to participants and Paul, allowed to talk.
Right.
Can you give us a brief version of your question, Paul? Did I unmute you? No, I didn't.
Hello, I'm sorry. I clicked by mistake, so all I've done is interrupted you. I do apologize.
I'm glad to have you here from the United Kingdom. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. No problem.
Okay.
Thank you for attending.
I was going to ask you something, but I'll just leave it for people to read in the book. That you talk about mistakes that people make in their investing and in their savings. So that's in there too, very important.
Yeah, yeah, and that
Mm.
chapter came as a result of all that qualitative analysis, because it became very clear that we just have to talk about it, right? I mean, we are going to make mistakes, but at least, you know, as long as we don't make big ones and fall in the same traps, then it would save us months or years of hard-earned labor, you know. So yes, I think that became a chapter because just so many of the people's stories highlighted that theme that, oh, you know, I made that mistake, you know, I wish I'd done this one, I'd done that one. So, you know, we had to kind of bring up the common and big ones, you know.
Okay. Well, at this point, Ketan, I would like to say thank you very much for giving us your time and your knowledge and your expertise today. I know your schedule is just absolutely stuffed because you have a portfolio career, as you said, being a pediatric oncologist. So I wanted to say thank you very much on behalf of Toronto Mensa for your generosity and your expertise, sharing it with us. And just so you know, Toronto Mensa will be sending you a small gift as a sign of our appreciation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for having me, and really appreciate all the support and interaction. You know, fantastic. And if anybody has any comments, questions, or critique, you know, happy to receive it. And it's a work in progress. You know, this is version 1 of the book, and we will see where it goes from here. So happy to have any interaction with anybody.
Great. If people email their questions to me, I'll be happy to pass them on.
For
Okay,
sure.
thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for participating. Thank you for attending. It's lovely to see you today or this evening, depending on where you are. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.
So
Thank you.
bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.